One for All is literally the only quirk in My Hero Academia that gets more powerful every time its user dies. It's not just some ability, it's a chain of sacrifices stretching back generations, all kicked off by one spectacularly terrible decision made by a very evil older brother. 11 people carried this thing, and every single one of them gave everything they had. Some died in battle, some died just waiting for their turn to matter, and some never even got the chance to try. Meanwhile, one quirkless crybaby somehow carried it all the way to the finish line. So let's talk about all 11 One for All users in My Hero Academia. Everyone knows All Might. Almost nobody stops to think about the guy who made All Might possible in the first place. Yoichi Shigaraki. He's frail, imprisoned, completely at the mercy of his own brother, who happened to be the most dangerous person on the planet. And you probably don't know, All for One didn't kill him. He kept Yoichi alive, out of something that, twisted as it was, looked a lot like love, which honestly makes All for One creepier, not more sympathetic. When All for One shoved a quirk into him against his will, something unexpected happened. It fused with a stockpiling ability Yoichi already had sitting dormant inside him. That accident became One for All. The problem was Yoichi's body was already too worn down to actually use it, so he did the only thing left to him. He passed it on, trusted complete strangers with everything, and hoped that the line wouldn't break somewhere down the road. Then, centuries later, when Tomura Shigaraki reaches into the Vestige world trying to rip the quirk away, Yoichi fights back. A man who could barely stand when he was alive, holding the line against his brother from beyond death. The next user is Kudo. He didn't trust anyone. It's not a flaw. It's a survival strategy when you're running an underground resistance against the most powerful villain in human history. When he first crossed paths with Yoichi, his gut said eliminate the threat. He almost did it. What stopped him wasn't pity, it was proof. Yoichi genuinely despised his own brother, and that was enough for Kudo to let him live. Kudo inherited the quirk almost by accident, Yoichi's blood making contact during a fight. And he didn't make a moment out of it, he just kept moving. When All for One finally cornered him, Kudo had already passed it forward, so he stood there with nothing left and fought anyway. All for One showed up to his funeral. Kudo died smiling, and that tells you everything. You probably forgot this one existed. That's kind of the point. No iconic last stand, no big speech. Bruce Lee was just a quiet guy who carried an impossible weight and handed it off without asking for credit. His quirk, Fajin, stores kinetic energy through repetitive motion and releases it all at once. Simple on paper, but in practice, it's the reason Deku can ever touch 100% without his skeleton giving out. Every time Deku pulls off 100%, that brief, terrifying burst of full power, he's borrowing something the third user built and left behind. Bruce Lee fought in the same war as Kudo, survived the same impossible odds, then disappeared from the story so quietly, most fans need a reminder he was ever even there. But next time Deku goes full power and walks away standing, that's Bruce Lee's contribution. Every other user tried to fight All for One. Hikage Shinomori looked at that plan and said no. Not out of fear, but out of logic. He understood the gap better than anyone, so instead of dying in a fight he couldn't win, he vanished. 18 years in hiding, just training. Quietly feeding One for All stockpile so the next person inherited something stronger than what he got. Nobody told him to do that. No guarantee it would even work. He just believed in the chain. Here's the part that hits hardest though. Hikage was already dying the whole time. Having a quirk before receiving One for All meant the doubled load was burning through his lifespan. Hikage spent 18 years bleeding out slowly for successors he'd never met. No glory, no final fight, just quiet and devastating commitment. One for All came for Daigoro Banjo twice, and left with nothing both times. That's the whole character summary right there. His quirk, Black Whip, dark energy tendrils, fast, dangerous, and genuinely threatening. Then it sat inside One for All stockpile for decades, quietly getting stronger. When Deku accidentally triggers it the first time, it nearly demolishes an entire area. Banjo shows up in the Vestige world completely unbothered and tells Deku to relax. It just got a little bigger. When One for All finally got him, Banjo was buried under rubble, bleeding out. Done. But he still reached his hand out and passed One for All forward before dying. And Tayutai has no backstory, no childhood flashback, no defining speech, no dramatic build-up. What he gets is one scene, and it matters more than most characters get across entire arcs. All for One cuts him nearly in half mid-battle, but N doesn't scream, doesn't collapse. He finds Nana Shimura and hands her some of his hair, DNA transfer. That's all it takes, and passes One for All forward before he's gone. That's it. That's his whole contribution. But without that handoff, there's no Nana. Without Nana, there's no All Might. Without All Might, there's no Deku. His quirk was smokescreen. Purple clouds, obscure and redirect, and vanish before the enemy can pin you down. And in Japanese, literally means smoke. The writers named him after his own quirk and then gave him an exit so quiet most fans didn't even register it. Nana Shimura was built different. She's compassionate, fierce, carrying the weight of a whole legacy. She wasn't just a great hero. She was the kind of person who made you actually believe in heroes. Her quirk, Float, lets her suspend herself midair. It sounds simple until you combine it with One for All, and then it's terrifying. But here's what really defines her. Nana was a mother, and to keep her son Tenko away from the danger that followed her everywhere, she gave him up to a foster family. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. She then passed one for all to a quirkless kid named Toshinori, believing in him when literally nobody else did. But unfortunately, that son she abandoned to keep him safe grew up to become Shigaraki. The villain dismantling everything she died for is her own child. That one doesn't leave you. This user is a man, the myth. Toshinori didn't even have a quirk when Nana found him. He looked her in the eye and said he wanted to create a world where everyone could smile. She couldn't say no to that. After years of brutal training, he became All Might, the symbol of peace. #1 hero, and the guy villains genuinely had nightmares about. All Might held One for All for over 40 years, longer than almost anyone, because being born quirkless meant the power wasn't slowly killing him. He was the first user to actually beat All for One, but that win cost him everything. His stomach, his respiratory system, and eventually his ability to be the hero the world needed. Watching him go from the most powerful man alive to a frail guy pouring his last embers into training one quirkless kid, that's not character development, that's a slow emotional demolition. Izuku is quirkless, a crybaby, the kid everyone counted out, now carrying the hopes of every single previous user on his back. Izuku inherited One for All after one moment of pure selfless bravery and immediately started destroying his own body using it. But here's what separates Deku from everyone before him. He didn't just inherit One for All, he unlocked every quirk from every previous user. Black Whip, Float, Danger Sense, Smokescreen, Fajin, and finally Gear Shift, the last resort that lets him push past 100%. No previous user ever touched any of that. Deku literally holds team meetings with past users in his own subconscious, and when he finally transfers One for All at the very end, he reaches into Shigaraki and pulls out Tenko Shimura's trap spirit. The kid who had nothing turned out to be the only one who could save everyone. Nobody saw this coming, not even Bakugo. In a last-ditch attempt to stop 9, Deku did the unthinkable and transferred One for All to his biggest rival, the guy who spent years telling him he was worthless. And Bakugo picked up one of the most complex quirks in existence and immediately ran it at full cal 100% like he trained with it his whole life. No instructions, no warm-up, just pure natural talent, which is honestly kind of infuriating. His explosions, enhanced by One for All, were melting through solid rock like it was nothing. He lost the quirk after the battle, but that rivalry, the one that started everything between him and Deku, that's what ultimately helped pull the world back from the edge. The most tragic ending to the most tragic story. In the final battle, Deku made an impossible call. He forcibly transferred every single quirk from One for All directly into Shigaraki. Not to give him power, to destroy the All for One parasite eating him from the inside out. The quirk shattered almost instantly on impact. One for All went with them. Deku came out the other side quirkless again. But in that moment, he reached through all the rage and destruction and found Tenko, the little boy buried underneath all of it, and finally set him free. The curse ended exactly where it started, with a Shigaraki. And that's every single user of One for All. 11 users, 11 lifetimes of sacrifice, pain, and unfinished business, all handed down to one quirkless kid. One for All was never just a power. It was a promise passed through blood and loss across generations. And Deku kept it. If this video hits different, please subscribe. More breakdowns are coming and you don't want to miss them.